So, in the winter, many people go down, and the library also doesn't have classes. So, I felt that we should make this winter a little bit warmer by doing various activities, including classes. So, I had time, little bit of time, so I thought I will spend around 10 or 2 weeks, something like that, explaining this text. Shiksha Samuchaya, compendium of precepts in verses. What we have here in this text is just the root text with a very short commentary, which I did many years back. And so both the English and Tibetan version is here. And the commentary to this text is this one, which in a way is not commentary in the sense of explaining each and every verse in a very detailed way, but it just gives the meaning by citing quotations from all kinds of sutras. So this is really, of course, all the works of Shantideva, they are amazing texts, and this particularly is a wonderful, precious text. And I had received this teaching from His Holiness several years before. And I have personal interest in some texts, maybe due to my karmic connection or whatever. Like Aryadeva's 400 verses, or all the works of Shantideva, things like that. So then this, if we just use the root text, it is not very lengthy. And I think it will be a great inspiration if we sit together and study this text. And I go to different places giving talks and teachings, but normally without using text, you see, because there's not much time. But I have always been encouraging, especially the Tibetan communities and those who organize such talks and teachings, that it's not just me, whoever is giving a talk, whatever you're organizing, make sure that you give at least 1 week or 2 weeks and choose a text. And let the teacher prepare the text with English, with the Tibetan, if possible, some annotations, explanations of the difficult texts. That way we can help the younger Tibetans to be familiar with some of these special texts. Not just a teacher is talking and giving a general explanation, that is also useful. But if you become familiar with some of the important texts, then you will get this idea, I read this text, precious text by Shantideva, who wrote this text in the 8th century, imagine. And then, because you are reading the verse by verse, you are reading the Tibetan, if I can speak in Tibetan, then I can teach better even. But then there are many Tibetan teachers, so that's why there are not many who can teach in English. So that's why I'm teaching in English. I would actually prefer teaching in Tibetan, so that I can explain each and every word by word, you see. So anyway, still you have access to this text, and the translation is there, so I'm sure you will be able to get some idea. Okay? So right in the beginning, we should all consider extremely fortunate to be able to have access to such precious text. That is the first condition. Don't take it for granted. Very fortunate to have this opportunity to sit here for a few days, listen to such precious text. Because we are here in this world for a very short time, not very long. And of course, we all know that we came into this world with nothing. We brought nothing into this world. And finally, when we leave this world also, we can't take anything from this world. And in between, while we are alive also, unless you have the knowledge in the head and kindness in the heart, the other things you need, the material things you need, but they will become more or less, baggage. They are fish. They will all become more or less baggages,
We have 2 more?
No, nothing. Just sit down. So that's the thing, you see. At the end of the day, one thing that will definitely help you is your way of thinking. Whether you like it or not, your friends will fail you. your material accumulations will fail you. I mean, fail you in the sense that even in the case of your best friends, best relatives, they can help you to a limited extent, not beyond that. Then there are cases of bad friends, bad spouses, bad relations, which of course is just extra headache and no use at all. But even in the case of those good friends and relatives, they can help you to a limited extent. Your material accumulations can also help you to a limited extent, not beyond that. That's the first condition we need to know. So therefore we need to really ask this very pertinent question, and which is a question that I always ask, and I've asked this question in Goa when she was there also, when I gave a talk there just a few days back. So we need to ask this question, do I want happiness? I ask this question to many people, do you want happiness? And everybody says, yes, I want happiness. For how many days? Then they all start laughing. They all start laughing because gaining happiness is not just for a few days. Everybody knows if it is possible, we should get happiness at least for this life until you die. And if you're somebody with, more far-sightedness, then you will expect that peace and happiness for many lives to come, as we say in Buddhism. But at least we know I want this happiness for a longer time, for the whole life. And what kind of happiness? Superficial happiness or reliable, long-lasting happiness? Everybody will say reliable, long-lasting happiness. So that wish to have that reliable, long-lasting peace and happiness is not something that you understood based on the teaching of the Buddha. That longing for long-lasting peace and happiness was an inborn quality. Right from the birth you have this aspiration to have happiness and to have peace. And I always give the example that right after the birth of the child, the first thing that the child does is crying, not laughing or not smiling. If the first thing that the child does is crying, is laughing or smiling, then people will be surprised by saying, oh, maybe this child must be, a reincarnation or a ghost, which is very unusual. So the usual thing is, people cry. The first thing that we do after having, came into this world is crying. By crying, the child is not asking for a lengthy discourse on Buddhism. It's very short. The child is not asking for a long teaching on Buddhism. Do you think by crying, the child is asking for a lengthy discourse on Buddhism? No, definitely not. So the child is simply asking for somebody's genuine love and affection. So that is our given reality. So my point is that since right from the birth, as a part of our nature, we all came into this world wanting that long-lasting peace and happiness. So that is the thing that you need to remember all the time. That I want reliable, long-lasting peace and happiness. That you need to remember. Always you need to remember. Now if you want the reliable, long-lasting peace and happiness, how are you going to get that? As I already touched, are you going to get that reliable, long-lasting peace and happiness from your parents? So you need to think. Are you going to get it from your relatives and parents? Honestly speaking, no. Are you going to get that reliable, long-lasting peace and happiness from money, from accumulation of material resources? Again, no. A big no. Yes, I agree that we get some kind of peace, some kind of help and assistance from wealth and from relatives and friends, but we are talking about getting reliable, long-lasting peace, happiness. That you cannot get from material accumulations or from what is outside of you. Mark this point. You are not going to get that long-lasting peace and happiness from what is outside of you, including Buddha. If it is possible to get that long-lasting peace and happiness from what is outside of us, then the Buddha should have given that to us a long time back, because he is omniscient, he is almighty, he is compassionate, so he should have given it to us a long time back. But instead he said, I can show you the path to liberation. Liberation is up to you. I can only show you the path, and you need to practice. Unless you practice, you are not going to get that long-lasting peace and happiness. So that's why I like the ordinary phrase that when we meet somebody and then we depart, and then we say, bye, take care. Nobody says, bye, I will take care of you. Bye, I will take care of you. Everybody says, bye, take care. See? Even through using common sense. Bye, take care. You need to take care of yourself. So it is in this context that the Buddha said, self is the protector of the self, no one else can be the protector. Likewise, self is the enemy of the self, no one else can be the enemy. We are very good in complaining about the wrongdoings of others. He did this to me, she did this to me, But we never think and realize how much problem we are creating upon ourselves because of our wrong ways of thinking, our wrong ways of life, wrong ways of action, and so forth. So self is the enemy of the self. So you are responsible. You need to take care of yourself. A Tibetan teacher says that there is nobody who will catch hold of your hand and throw you into heaven. However good that person may be, there's nobody who can catch hold of your hand and throw you into heaven. And likewise, there is nobody, however mean and bad, who can catch hold of your leg and throw you into hell. Even the Chinese leaders, they cannot catch hold of the legs of the Tibetans and throw us into hell. They can physically create a lot of problems, tortures, imprisonment, and so forth. But they cannot throw us into hell. So therefore, your happiness and your peace is in your hand. Do not cheat yourself. We feel let down when somebody cheats us. But how many times we have cheated ourselves? So what is taught in Buddhism is take care of yourself. You should be your own master. So in simple language, this whole Buddhist process of teaching is how to cultivate a positive way of thinking. How to be master of yourself. Because if you are able to cultivate a positive way of thinking, which means a way of thinking which is based on understanding the reality, understanding the law of nature, which is based on loving kindness, which is based on compassion, then wherever you go, you will be okay. If you understand the law of nature. Now here I am talking big, you see. When I say understanding the law of nature, I am talking big. A lot of things are there. That is why Buddha is talking about understanding shunyata, understanding impermanence, understanding suffering, and so forth. He is basically talking about understand the law of nature. If you understand the law of nature, you will fare well in your life. Whatever be the ups and downs in your life, you will fare well. Whatever be the fluctuations in your life, you will not be carried away by those fluctuations. You will always be happy. You see. If your way of thinking is not good, then sometimes you get some exciting news, you get so excited that you almost burst out. And sometimes you get bad news, you get so dejected that you start thinking that I'm the most unfortunate person in this world, which is not true, you see. So therefore, if you are somebody who has really understood the way things are, then this fluctuation in life, this turbulence in life, these agitations in life will not affect you. Or even if they affect you, they will affect you much less. Therefore, your life will be steady. That's what is being taught in Buddhism. How can you survive in the turbulence of life? The turbulences are created by negative emotions. The agitations are created by negative emotions. So in Buddhism, the one enemy that you need to fight is not the external enemy, but the enemy within oneself, the negative emotions. How to fight the negative emotions? To make a long story short, you have only one job to do if you want to undertake Buddhist practice. You have just one work to do. And that one work, that one job is to fight against these negative emotions. Because when these negative emotions like anger arises in you, it makes you weak. It makes you vulnerable. It makes you depressed. It creates loneliness, low self-esteem, depression, whatever we call, using the modern terms. All this is because of negative emotions. So therefore, during these few days when we are together, of course we'll read this text, but we need to do a little bit of our own homework and thinking that what is best for me in life. Of course you need this education, that education, this friend, that friend, all this, okay, all right. But the most important thing is your way of thinking. I call it national highway. You see, there should be you should be walking on the national highway. That means you should have, whatever you are doing, you should have a proper way of thinking. So that even though you go a little bit here and there, but you come back to the national highway. You're not completely carried away by the sidewalks. So that's very important. So it's not talking, when we talk about Buddhism, we are not talking about something that can never be achieved. Even when you talk about nirvana or enlightenment, to be honest, they are not easy, you see. So because they are not easy, people might start thinking, what is the use of Buddhism, you see. People might start thinking, but that is wrong understanding. Your long-term goal is nirvana. Your long-term goal is Buddhahood. But you need to work. You need to start, walking towards that ultimate state from here right now, taking the baby steps. And by taking those baby steps, by fighting against these negative emotions, you will be happier and happier right now. And I always encourage and tell people that if you change your way of thinking a little bit, you will be happier just today. And you need to learn to have that happiness right from today, not tomorrow. So that is what is being taught in Buddhism. And if you are able to transform yourself, transform your attitude and thinking, you will see something like magic and mystery. The real magic is not being able to fly in the space or open a third eye here. The real magic is if you are able to reduce the intensity of this negative emotion. That is magic, which is so difficult to do. But it is possible to do. So therefore you need to ask these questions. Okay, I want to be happy, not for a few days, but for a long time. I want that long-lasting peace and happiness. So what is it that obstructs getting that long-lasting peace and happiness? Negative emotions. What are the negative emotions? Negative emotions are those emotions which when arises in your mind makes you completely turbulent and disturbed. Those are negative emotions. For example, let me give you one example. For example, anger. As soon as anger arises in your mind, you are completely disturbed and agitated. You feel unhappy. There's nobody who right in the morning makes a motivation saying that today I will get angry. There's nobody. Is there anybody who makes a motivation right from the morning saying that today I will get angry? There's nobody who makes such a motivation, meaning that they have some idea that anger is not good. But anyway, in the day, when they go out and work with different people, because of co-workers, because of the working situation, whatever be the case, they get angry. But then at the end of the day, when you reflect back and realize that you got angry on that day, again there's nobody who says that today I was really angry, so I really enjoyed the day. There's nobody. There's nobody. So clearly showing that anger is destructive and negative. So you need to think in this way. When anger arises, it makes you ugly. You want to become ugly? Nobody wants to become ugly. That's why we comb our hair, put some cosmetics, make sure that there's no spot on your face. You look at the mirror, you decorate yourself, make sure that your clothes are properly, done. And in some cases, you also put some ornaments, including golden earrings and so forth. So after all these decorations, ornaments, you get angry. Now, do you look handsome or beautiful? No. See? So therefore, even if you want to become handsome, don't get angry. If you want to become beautiful, don't get angry. And if you don't get angry, and instead, if you have some kind of positive way of thinking, especially patience and compassion within your heart, you will always be smiling. And that smile on the face is the most beautiful thing. That will make you handsome. That will make you beautiful. That will cost you nothing. You see, the smile on the face. Look at the image of the Buddha, or look at His Holiness Dalai Lama, always smiling. Makes everybody happy. You see. People are dying to just get a glimpse of His Holiness Dalai Lama. And that was true at the time of the Buddha also, you see. So what is it that is radiating from them? Genuine expression of love and compassion with that smile, you see. It's the most beautiful decoration. So this is what is taught in Buddhism. So do you think this is useful in your life? Of course. So practice of teaching like Buddhism is, I always say, this is not a luxury. This is a necessity. Necessity. Luxury means you have it, wonderful. You don't have it, okay. It's like living in a, spending your days in a 5-star hotel, If you have enough money, stay in a 5-star hotel, okay. If you don't have enough money, you don't have to stay in a 5-star hotel. You stay in a smaller cottage, smaller room. It's fine. So it's not like that. But you need at least a room to stay. So like that, this spiritual practices. Buddhism is not a religion as we understand in the West. It is a spirituality. It is a science of mind. It is a way of living. Okay? So therefore, it is important to realize how important it is for your own personal well-being and happiness, and how important it is in the society. Because if we are able to cultivate such positive way of thinking, then the society there will be harmony in the society. There will be no corruption. There will be no exploitation, you see. So everywhere there will be, it is almost like creating nirvana right here on this place. You see, so it's very, very important, extremely important. So therefore, right at the outset, we should all rejoice and be happy that we are able to spend this time to read this text. Okay? So I will try to explain this, and you read it carefully. Then in between, if you did not understand anything, you can ask me again. We'll also leave some time for question and answer, or even after the classes, if there are things to be asked, please ask me questions. The point that we need to do is, after we have finished this text, you should be able to understand this text, or at least the main points. Clear? Clear? If it's not clear, then right on the spot you can ask me, Geshe-la, what you are saying doesn't make any sense. Ask me a question. So, we'll read from the cover. Compendium of Precepts in Verses. Compendium of Precepts in Verses. Compendium is collection. Collection of precepts. Precepts means those things that you should train in. So here precepts means precepts of the Bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are those who have cultivated the mind to Buddhahood. Bodhisattvas are those who have cultivated bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, Changchuk Sem, is a mind wishing to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Bodhicitta is a mind wishing to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay? Bodhicitta. Bodhicitta. Bodhi, enlightenment. Chitta, mind. So, It means mind to enlightenment. That means a mind which aspires to become Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. Clear? Compendium of precepts and verses. So in the Indian language, it's called Shiksha Samuchaya Karika. Shiksha means precepts. Samuchaya, collection, compendium. This is a Sanskrit word. Shiksha means precepts. Lapa. Compendium means compendium. Samuchaya means compendium. Karika, verses. Homage to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Homage to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The Tibetan word for homage is Chakselva. 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 This Tibetan word Chakselva is a combination of two words. Chak means to sweep. Just like we sweep the room. So chak means sweep. Salva means to seek. So Chakselva means to sweep and seek. Which means just like we sweep the dust, similarly we should sweep the negative emotions within ourselves. We should cleanse ourselves of the negative emotions. You empty yourself of the negative emotions. And then it's not enough that you empty yourself of the negative emotions, but you should also seek the higher qualities of the enlightened beings. The higher qualities of body, speech and mind of enlightened beings. Chak Salva. Extremely wonderful. Chak Salva. So again you can clearly see the purpose of your undertaking such a teaching is to purify your negative emotions and to seek the higher qualities of body, speech and mind of the enlightened beings, of the Buddhas. Chak Salva. Paying homage or Chak Salva is an antidote to arrogance. Chak Salva, when we pay homage, we do like this. We bow down a little bit. That is antidote to arrogance. People who are arrogant, they'll go like this. They will not bow down, they'll go like this. Because they are arrogant, therefore they will never think about seeking good qualities from others. But when you pay homage, which means when you practice humility, then you make yourself receptive of higher qualities from others. So that's the advantage. So always be humble. And the Kadamba masters, they say, you should yourself see and look at the nature, whether the beautiful green grasses and the flowers and plants, whether they grow on the exposed top of a high mountain or down in the valley. They grow down in the valley. The beautiful green grasses, flowers, plants, they mostly grow down in the valley, in the lower places. Similarly, if you remain humble, practice humility, you can always receive knowledge from others. Even from the mouth of a child, you can receive knowledge if you open up. But instead, if you become arrogant, you will not be able to receive anything. For example, even when you are listening to a teacher, if your motivation to listen to the teacher is to examine him, to find out whether he is a good teacher or not, whether what he is teaching is in accordance with what you already know or not, that's the wrong ways of listening to the teaching, you see. You should listen. There in Tibet, there is a story of a very famous senior teacher who goes to receive teaching from even junior lamas. And his attendant used to advise him, "You are such a great teacher. It is not befitting that you go to junior teachers to receive teaching." Then the senior lama, he said, no, don't say like this. It may be, you may be right, it may be true that I may not be hearing anything which I have not heard before, but I'm learning something which I have not learned before. That's the thing, you see. It's not enough that you have heard. The problem we have is we are hearing but we are not listening. We are hearing but not listening. We are looking but not seeing. That's the problem. That's the human tragedy. I can explain more about this later on. So that's the thing, you see. So therefore, paying respect to senior teachers, paying respect to your parents, paying respect to those with higher qualities, or even people who are senior in age, is extremely, extremely important. Because particularly if you are a genuine practitioner of the Bodhisattva path, then in the Bodhisattva path it says that you should respect everybody. Even when you see somebody doing bad things, don't highlight the bad things that person is doing. It's none of your business. Even if you see a monk who may not be very good in his moral practices, or even if you see a lay person who is not doing properly, then we have this tendency to highlight, he is not good. Then you start writing about that person, saying bad things about this person. It's happening in our society. But in this text, you can read in this text, it clearly says, don't do that. It's none of your business. You cannot judge who is who. You cannot judge who is who. And honestly speaking, there's nobody who is not committing any mistake. Small mistakes here and there, everybody commits such a mistake. But if you keep on highlighting those mistakes, then you will never get an opportunity to appreciate the positive things that other people are doing. So what we need to do is to encourage each other, talk about positive qualities. Encourage each other how to cultivate these positive qualities rather than dampening the spirit of other people by their wrongdoings. You see, because a bodhisattva, practitioners of the bodhisattva path, he sees that the Buddha nature is they are in everybody. You have Buddha nature, you have Buddha nature, everybody has Buddha nature. For example, if you want to take care of a very costly tree, then when you plant the seed for that very costly tree, then you will cherish that seed. Make sure that it's watered, make sure there's enough sunshine, make sure there's enough moisture and all the other requirements. Because you are already seeing in that seed the beautiful tree, the costly tree with flowers and so on. Similarly, the Bodhisattva sees the Buddha potential in each and every sentient being. So their responsibility is how to encourage them to let them flower that Buddha seed rather than destroy that Buddha seed. So that is why it is important to write in the beginning, homage to all the Buddhas. Who are the Buddhas? Buddhas are those who are completely enlightened, who are omniscient, whose compassion is equal to everybody, who has removed all sufferings, all problems, all difficulties, all the negative emotions, the seeds of the negative emotions, the imprints of the negative emotions. So those are called the Buddhas, the enlightened beings. Bodhisattvas are those who have cultivated bodhicitta, and I've already explained bodhicitta. Clear? So the cover is clear? I may do an examination in the end. Okay, then the next first page. So now, before I start the text, you need to understand the content of this text. This text is what this text is talking about. Without reading this text, let me discuss this. What this text is talking about. This text is talking about the precepts of a bodhisattva. This text is talking about precepts of bodhisattva. So therefore it talks about how to cultivate bodhicitta and what to practice. Now in terms of practice, this text is particularly explained those precepts in a very convincing and nice way. Because the aim of a bodhisattva is how to use one's body for the benefit of others. Number one, how to use one's body to the benefit of others, in the service of others. Second, how to use one's wealth in the service of others. Third, how to use one's good deeds. Seed of virtuous practices means good deeds basically. So that's what is being taught in this text. How to use one's life, one's body, one's wealth, and one's good deeds in the service of others. So that is the main text. So now if your aim or your objective is to ensure that your life or body and your enjoyment or wealth and your good deeds, if you want to use all these three for the benefit of other sentient beings, then how would you do it? First of all, he talks about using these three things by first giving these three things. Giving your life or your body in the service of others, giving your wealth to the others, giving your good deeds to the others. The three are to be practiced. How will you practice these three? First, by giving these three. Now, in order to give something to others, you need to protect them. For example, if you are to use your life or body in the service of others, first of all, you need to make sure that you have a healthy life. You have a healthy life, even in the ordinary sense of the term, healthy life. But here, protecting primarily means making your life engage in constructive acts, not destructive acts. Letting your life cultivate positive emotions, not negative emotions. That is really protecting yourself. That's the best way of protecting yourself. So protecting is the second. Then enhancing it. Whatever practices you are doing, you should ensure that this becomes a uncontaminated practice. In a way, it is like purifying your good deeds. And then fourth, developing. Because when you talk about using these three things to help other sentient beings, what is the number of the sentient beings? 2 million, 3 million, how many millions? Countless, so many. We are not talking just about human beings, but all sentient beings. There are so many sentient beings. So in order to benefit all these sentient beings, you need to develop the activities of your body, your wealth and your good deeds, so that you are able to help many of them. That's why you need to become a Buddha. Of course, people might think, why do we have to wait until we become a Buddha to benefit sentient beings? We can start helping right now. We might think like that. But yes, you can help, but right now you even do not know how to help. Your power is limited, your knowledge is limited, your compassion is limited. It's only by becoming a Buddha you will be able to understand what are the needs of other people. So accordingly, how you can help. Then Buddha has the clairvoyance. He is the power, he is the compassion, he is the wisdom. So that he is in a better position to help others. So therefore, this text is primarily talking about these three things: how to use your life or body and your wealth and your good deeds, and use these three things by giving them, by protecting them, by enhancing them, and by developing them. So this is called the twofold practice. 3 into 4, 12. 3 4 is 12. So that is what is taught in this practice. So we are done basically. How goes on clear? If somebody asks us, what is this labtu, then labtu means lapa, chanju simple lapa su du ruru so chayo. This one? Okay. And then by undertaking such a practice, this text is of course talking about this practice of the 6 perfections. Because when we talk about the Bodhisattva precepts, then we are talking about the practices of the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva practices are countless. Because the needs of sentient beings are countless, their practices are countless. But if we are to summarize them, it can be primarily summarized into the practice of the 6 perfections, which are generosity or giving, morality, patience, perseverance or effort, concentration and wisdom, 6 perfections. So that will also be taught in this text. Clear? So first we will be discussing about the practice of giving. A great being would think, look at this word, a great being. If you want to remain an ordinary person, you don't have to think. If you want to become a good person, a great person, you see, a great person is great not in terms of physical size, but in terms of his thinking. As is outlined in the very beginning of the Lamb of the Path by Atisha, when he explains about three types of individual: the small individual, the middling individual, and the great individual. He explains the great individual by saying that those people who, by understanding their own suffering, if they are able to perceive the sufferings of other sentient beings and develops a wish to completely uproot the sufferings of other sentient beings and lead them to the path of achieving Buddhahood, such a person is called great individual. Great individual. Even if you think about this English word, mature, when we say this person is matured, especially the maturity in terms of your mind, then the maturity, even in English term, ordinary meaning, maturity means when your concern for other outweighs your concern for yourself. That's called maturity. You see? So if you're somebody who just thinks about oneself and completely ignores others, then that person is, in the right sense of the term, still not mature. Physically may be mature, but mentally not mature. Clear? So therefore, great being is somebody who is really matured in the sense of thinking about well-being of all other sentient beings. And that is the Mahayana path, that is the Bodhisattvayana path. And that's extremely, extremely important, not just for achieving Buddhahood, enlightenment, but in our daily life. Again, if we are living in a society where everybody cares about others and always thinks about others, how can I do this to help others? How can I do this so that I will be able to make many others happy? If you are able to live with that simple life, not only you will be able to help others, but you yourself will shine out. And you will have less disease, less fear, less suffering, less problem. Most of the problems, fears, weaknesses, physical suffering, mental illness, all this comes because of concentration on oneself alone. What will happen to me? What will happen to me? What shall I eat? Always thinking about oneself. Just thinking about oneself is not bad, but simply just think about oneself and completely ignore and forget others. That's the problem. So that narrow-mindedness in Buddhism is called self-cherishing attitude. That self-cherishing attitude is source of all the physical illnesses and mental sicknesses. Now it is scientifically proved. It is scientifically proved. Not in Buddhism it's there. Since Buddha gave the teaching, this is there. But now it is scientifically proved that those people who make a lot of self-references and who always talks about I, me and mine all the time, I, me and mine all the time, these people are more prone to illnesses, including heart attack. This is scientifically proved, and I had the opportunity to attend that meeting in New York when His Holiness was having a discussion with some of the leading scientists. There was a scientist who came with data saying that people who make a lot of self-references and talk about I, me and mine all the time, they are prone to all kind of illnesses, including heart attack. And in Buddhism it is there, as I said long time back. For example, if you read Chandakirti's Madhyamika Avatara, right in the beginning of the text it talks about the illnesses that you will get by making these self-references. So again, if you genuinely want that long-lasting peace and happiness, then think more about others. Now when we talk about thinking more about others, taking care more of others, we are not asking you to do a sacrifice. We are simply asking that this is for your own goodness. This is for your own well-being. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama makes it very clear by saying, if you want to be selfish, be wisely selfish. Be wisely selfish. That means the ordinary way of being selfish is the stupid way of being selfish, because you think just about yourself and completely forget others. And the end result is that you'll get all the diseases, including the modern diseases like loneliness and so forth. So be wisely selfish means take more care about others and you will reap the benefit. There's the again law of nature, you see. Okay? So, the great being would think, a great being would think, see, I just want to focus on each of these words. A great being would think, great being number one. Great being is somebody who thinks more about the well-being of others. Number two, a great being would think. Ordinary people would not even think. They'll just take life for granted, and though they just go about in their daily life without thinking. Honestly speaking, people don't think. They're simply led by others. So we live a life like that of a cattle, which is always led by others and have not much sense of direction, you see. So great being would think. So I like this word, think. So in our case also, one very important feature in Buddhism is to think, to find things by yourself, not simply listening to a teacher, not even simply listening to the Buddha. Of course you can listen, but after having listened to the teaching, then you need to think. You need to find out the truth and validity of that teaching. Just like a scientist, use your logic, use your reason, think. Then you will be able to find out what is good for you in the long run and what is good for the benefit of others. So a great being would think. What would they think? As oneself and also others dislike fear and suffering, what within you is so special that you protect yourself and not others. See? The purpose is the pig the jello law, Hemason and Galatina digger. Making of the Pugajanja Javan Solar, Kamanga choose a jail dealing in the pig in Jokunjo with the Hijam degree. So as oneself and also, so what they think like this. As oneself and also others dislike fear and suffering, meaning that yourself and others are exactly same, that we do not want fear, we do not want suffering. So in that we are all same. Now since we are all same in this, why is it that you take care of yourself and not about others? What within you is so special that you protect yourself, you take care of yourself and not others? It's a very important question. We may not be very good in protecting ourselves, we may not be very good in taking care of ourselves, but at least we are trying our best to take care of ourselves. You make sure that you get good food, you make sure you're able to take rest, you make sure that you're able to sleep, you make sure that you're able to get some good friend. You try your best. It may be not the one that is best, or it may not be based on wisdom, but at least you're trying your best. The great Tibetan scholar Gintu Chimbe, he says that the legless earthworm runs in search of peace. The eyeless ant runs in search of peace. In short, the whole human race is running a big race in search of peace. See, we're all running, doing something, especially in today's world. Everybody's running. Not only walking, but they use car, they use motor. Still, they are not able to catch up. So they fly. Now with the flying also, they are trying to reduce the time. They make sure that we are able to reach from this part of the world to that part of the world with the shortest amount of time. So we are all running, and everybody says, I'm very busy. Yes, sir, you are very busy. But that is not important. But important thing is, what are you busy about? What are you busy about? And that, what are you busy about, nobody asks this question. So I have been provoking them, to people, many places I've been saying, yes, you are busy, but what are you busy about? That's the thing. We need to find some time to pause and think, what are we busy about? What am I busy about? Is this running senseless or meaningful? You see? Again, if you sit down and think like this great being, you will find much of your running is nonsense. You're just wasting your time. Okay? So therefore, so anyway, you at least try your best to take care of yourself. Now if somebody asks you the question, for the last many years I saw you are very, very busy and you are taking much care about yourself. Why are you taking so much care about yourself? If I ask you the question, this question, what is your answer? What is your answer? If you ask this question, will you say, of course I have to take care of myself because I'm a very special person? Can you give an answer like this? No, because most of us are not very special, number one. Even in the case, if you are a very special person, still, even in that case, if you give that kind of answer, that's not a correct answer. So the correct answer is that I take care about myself because, not because you are a special person, not because you are a professor, not because you are a scientist. You take care of yourself because you want happiness, do not want suffering. That's the correct answer. I take care of myself because I want happiness, I do not want suffering. That's correct answer. Now if that is the correct answer, then why don't you take care about others? Because they also want happiness, do not want suffering. So again there will be a question. Since others also want happiness, do not want suffering like you, why is it that you take so much care about yourself? Again the question remains unanswered. So the implication here is to say that because just like you, others also want happiness, do not want suffering, therefore it is not a good idea that you take care of yourself alone and forget the well-being of other sentient beings. Just as you take care of yourself, similarly you should take care of others also. So here you need to think about this because you are now a human being, thinking, living, intelligent human being. So therefore you need to think about this. If you are born as a cow or a dog, you don't have to think about this. You can't think about these things because you don't have the capacity to think about this. But you are not a cow, you are not a dog. You are a thinking, living, intelligent human being. So if you really want to prove your intelligence, which distinguishes you from other animals, then you need to ask these pertinent questions. Why do I take care about myself so much, forgetting the well-being of others? You need to ask these questions as somebody who has obtained this precious human life. Not just human life, but precious human life. A precious human life is a life with all the sense faculties intact. So you need to ask these questions. Of course, you will try to answer this back, because if you do not want to help others, then you will again try to rebut this by saying that yes, it is true that others also want happiness, do not want suffering, just like myself, but the others will take care of themselves, I will take care of myself. So it is not my business to take care of others. I'll take care of myself alone. You will come up with that kind of answer. So there, the text is like this one, and Shantideva's Bodhicharya Avtara and many Bodhisattva, texts, they say that you come with such an answer because you do not see the connection and relation with others. So it's not enough to say that they will take care of themselves, I will take care of myself, almost in an unrelated way. Because the fact is that you're all closely connected. You are very much connected to the others. So it's not justifiable to say that because they are others, I don't have to take care of them. In which case, some of these texts say that in which case you should not take care of the hand should not take care of the leg, because leg and hand are separate. If there is a problem with your leg, why should the hand go down to help the leg? They are separate. Leg is leg is not hand. Then of course you will say, oh yeah, that is true, leg is not hand, but it is my leg. And my hand and leg are related. It is a part of myself, therefore I need to go down to help the suffering leg. So in this case, the Bodhisattvas say exactly like that. The other sentient beings, if you are able to think properly, know properly, other sentient beings are also in a way part of yourself. This whole world is part of yourself. The sentient beings living within yourself is a part of yourself. You are directly, indirectly related to them. Your well-being, the food you eat, the clothes you wear, come through the service and help of many other people, which you may know or may not know. So therefore you need to take care of all of them. It's for your own benefit and well-being, number one. Number two, the more you think about others, your mind expands. You are able to develop a wider holistic perspective. When you are able to develop a wider holistic perspective, you will not be bogged down by narrow-minded selfishness. Therefore, again, you will be freer, you see. When you think big, more about others, you open up. It's very liberating. It's very freeing. But if you instead think just about yourself, it is suffocating, you see. So that's the difference. So therefore, as oneself and also others dislike fear of any kind, suffering of any kind, physical suffering, mental suffering, there are so many types of sufferings are there. So this being the case, what within you is so special, so when you look in this way, when you scrutinize in this way, you don't find anything special in you, that you protect yourself and not others. So one must therefore cultivate a mind. Now having understood that there is nothing special in you, that you take care of yourself and forget others, one must therefore cultivate a mind which desires to eliminate their suffering and achieve happiness and their happiness, just as you would do in your own case. Because all sentient beings are similar to you in wanting happiness and in not wanting suffering, and also in that we are all interdependent. So that's the fact. We are all interrelated, interconnected. Clear this verse, meaning of this verse clear? Clear? Second verse. Now having understood in this way, those who desire to end suffering and to achieve ultimate happiness should stabilize the root of faith and then stabilize the mind of enlightenment. So now here, since we are talking about cultivating bodhicitta, before practicing the bodhisattva precepts, we need to cultivate bodhicitta. Cultivation of bodhicitta is rooted in the cultivation of a special attitude, that means willingness to help others, special sense of responsibility. And the cultivation of that special sense of responsibility is rooted in the development of great compassion towards all other sentient beings. And what is compassion? Compassion is a mind which says, how nice if I am able to remove the sufferings of all sentient beings. How nice if I am able to remove the sufferings of all sentient beings. So that is a must. In order to cultivate that bodhicitta, you must cultivate a special sense of responsibility and that compassion towards all sentient beings. That is possible if you think carefully. Like for example, when you suffer, when you have a problem, you don't like it. You feel miserable. So similarly, when others are suffering, you should be able to understand that. And through that way, if you are able to at least cultivate some kind of compassion, at least a kind of facsimile compassion, That will help you develop the wish to achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Any questions? Those who wish to end suffering. In the beginning I said we all want happiness, and as far as happiness is concerned, we want the best, the maximum happiness, the most reliable happiness. Similarly, in the case of experiencing of suffering, we do not want any suffering. We do not want even the tiniest bit of suffering, just like the bite of a mosquito we don't want. But the problem with us is that although we want happiness, we never think about cultivating the causes for that long-lasting peace and happiness. Although we do not want suffering, but we never think about removing the causes of suffering. We continue to cultivate the causes of suffering, and because we continue to cultivate the causes of suffering, we continue to experience suffering. That's the problem. So in the case of the Buddha, he was a very intelligent, great being. So the difference, between Buddha and us is when Buddha, at his own time, in North India, he lived a very luxurious life of a prince. And he had all the most beautiful young women at his disposal, all kinds of wealth at his disposal. And some of the books, they explain that he has one, bathing pond here with yellow flowers, another pond with red flowers. He has his winter palace, his summer palace, and so many things are there. But right from the childhood, he was observant. What's happening around? He lived in a place where there are a lot of farming, farmers are there, farming is going on. And the farmers, how much success they get in their farming is very much dependent on the monsoon. So if there is no proper monsoon, there is a failure of crop and so forth. He was seeing all this. In this year, he saw all these changes of season, sufferings of people, doing the same thing. Next year also, more or less the same thing, suffering again, you see. Even this word, samsara, cycle of existence, probably come from that, what he observed in those days. Cycle of life, you see, in 1 year, next year, more or less doing the same stupid thing and experiencing the same suffering, you see. So he saw all this. And he said, how come that people keep on suffering the same thing, doing the same thing? And he observed two things, that people really wanted happiness, if possible the best happiness. And people do not want suffering, if possible not even the tiniest suffering. He saw that that is the innate urge of everybody. Then the next question he asked was, is it possible to get that happiness? Is there a cause for happiness? Is it possible to remove suffering? Is there a cause for suffering? So that is called Four Noble Truth. Happiness and its cause, suffering and its cause. That's called Four Noble Truth. In simple language. He saw suffering, and he also saw there is a cause. He saw happiness, people looking for happiness. Happiness also has a cause. So what he then encouraged people to do is, since you do not want suffering, suffering has a cause, so identify and recognize the causes of suffering and stop them. Don't cultivate them. What are the causes of suffering? Negative emotions. Anger, jealousy, hatred. Now we all know about this. We do not want suffering, but how many times we get angry? We are not practicing. That's why we continuously suffer. That's the problem. These negative emotions are very strongly entrenched within ourselves. It's very difficult to let them go. And especially if that negative emotions belongs to you, not to others. Then you tend to justify it. It's my anger, so it should be justified. I have a right to anger. There's the tendency, see. So how are you going to reduce your suffering, you see? So similarly, we all say, I want the best happiness, the most long-lasting peace and happiness. But have we cultivated the causes for peace and happiness? No. We have no time to cultivate causes for peace and happiness. We are completely distracted, sidetracked by the superficial glamours of this life, especially in today's world. You are so distracted by the shiny gadgets, by the advertisements. Hardly anybody is thinking, to be honest. We are completely led by the nose, by this business people, the commercial people. They do all this kind of advertisement. Everybody thinks, oh, I should have this, I should have that. And we go after the five senses. Something beautiful you need to say, oh, I should have that. Something nice to, to hear, go after that. Something tasty to taste, go after that. And something soft to touch, go after that. Something fragrant to smell, go after that. So we become a slave to the dictates of the five senses. Where is the mind? Which is your boss. Where is your boss? Your mind is completely neglected. Mind is not functioning. Even if it is functioning as a slave to the dictates of the five senses. The eye says, I want to see this. Mind says, okay, see. The ear says, I want to listen to this. Mind says, okay, listen to this. The mind becomes powerless, completely powerless and helpless, and you go after these sensual objects. Right in the beginning I told you, happiness is to be cultivated from within yourself. It will not come from what is outside of you. But the way we are living our life is that we feel that happiness will come from outside. It will come from buying things. And we are already gone to such an extent that many people are under the impression that everything can be bought today. Your peace, your happiness, everything can be bought. If you have the money, everything can be bought. That is the tendency and impression that we have today, unfortunately. And you buy something, you will be happy. And if you are not happy, then okay, change the product. Buy another one, you will be happier. This mobile phone is not the latest one, update it. I will be happier. Nobody updates the internal mind. Your mind is the same stupid old mind as it was when you were born, not updated at all, probably. That's the tragedy. Still we praise ourselves by saying we are living in the age of information. Yes, you are living in the age of information, but what kind of information you are getting? Most of the information you are getting is junk information. And the Buddha in one of his sutra clearly says, don't make your mind a dustbin. Your mind is not a dustbin. So if you put all kind of useless information in your mind, then it's nobody but yourself who is making your mind a dustbin. So see how much you are taking care about yourself, you see. So therefore, the thrust and focus of Buddhist practice is internal. That's why we talk about meditation. Use your mind. Change it, transform it, empower it. Make your mind habituated with positive qualities, positive emotions. From there, then you will get the strength, you will get the patience, you will get wisdom. Then you will be able to fare well in your life. Instead, if you let yourself completely enslaved by the dictates of the five senses, you will never be able to come out from those quagmires of desire. So again, you can clearly see you are your own master. Your problems, your sufferings are created by yourself. So if you change your attitude a little bit, there will be huge difference. Therefore, some of the Buddhist teachers, they say, even with a motivation to do some practice, even if you change the position of your neck, you can make a difference. Meaning that if you are seeing something which is not good, which is disturbing, instead of seeing that, you see here, there's a difference, you see. So you can do that. You can do that. So therefore, in order to undertake these practices, you should be able to see the benefit, usefulness of such a practice, number one. And number two, you can do it if you make an effort. So right from today, you have to make that effort to become better. So genuinely, if you are one who desires to end suffering, not just talking, but if you genuinely want to end suffering, and if you genuinely, not just talking, but from the depth of your heart, if you are aspiring to achieve that ultimate happiness, then you need to do few things. One, should stabilize in the root of faith. That means you should develop faith in the teachings. Number one. Number two, then stabilize the mind of enlightenment. That means then you should strengthen your bodhicitta, practice of bodhicitta. The two things you need to do. Now first is developing faith. Now when we talk about developing faith, there are two ways of developing faith. One is the way of the intelligent people. Another is the way of people whose mind is blunt, which means who are not very intelligent. So here in the Bodhisattvayana practice, the way you cultivate your faith should be the way of the intelligent person. So intelligent person cultivates faith not just out of ignorance. It is not blind faith, but he cultivates that faith based on knowledge, based on understanding, based on experiment, based on observation. So he's talking about cultivating that faith. He's not talking about cultivating blind faith. He's not saying just close your mind, eye, and then develop devotion to the Buddha and all problems will be solved. He's not talking about that. He's simply saying that you should cultivate a faith which is based on knowledge, which is based on understanding. So there are basically, sometimes we talk about 3 types of faith, sometimes we talk about 4 types of faiths. The first kind of faith is called clarifying faith, something like clarifying faith. So clarifying faith here means that your mind has appreciation, your mind is liking towards the teaching. There is appreciation towards the teaching of the Buddha. And that appreciation will of course come by studying. And without studying, how will you be able to appreciate it? So once you see the qualities of the Buddha, qualities of the Dharma, qualities of the Sangha, you are able to develop such a strong appreciation that your mind will become pure and clear. How nice if I'm able to get this. Oh, these teachings are so precious. When you see a text, you put it on your head, Make sure that you are not jumping on that. When you see the image of the Buddha, you bow down. You see, all these things are now gradually disappearing, you see. In ancient times, people used to have that. They may or may not know, but at least there was this tradition of doing these things. But now these are disappearing, you see. So therefore, by studying, you should really be able to, this is really the source of ultimate peace and happiness for all sentient beings. So with that understanding, you regard this as something very holy, very sacred. Therefore, whenever you see holy text, holy images, great being, you develop that genuine appreciation and happiness. Just like a person with a lot of desire sees a very beautiful woman. That's the example. A person with a strong craving and desire, attachment, sees a beautiful woman. His mind just goes into that. Wow, how nice I can talk to this beautiful woman. Things like that. So to the Dharma, to the Buddha, to the Sangha, if you are able to develop that kind of appreciation and feeling of closeness, that is called clarifying faith. Second kind of faith is called trusting faith. Trusting faith. Because now you have studied the text, you have understood the meaning, so therefore you have this confirmation, thinking that if I really practice it, I will be happier. I can bring happiness in the mind of many other people. So you are able to develop that genuine trust. There is a story of a very old Tibetan woman, an old story. So she used to have a lot of faith to all the monks, sanghas. And of course, among sanghas, you will find some of the sanghas very naughty, misbehaved, So there was one monk who cheated her. Then somebody came and ridiculed her by saying, "Look, old woman, this is what you are going to get. Because you had so much faith to these monks, so this is what you get, you are now cheated." This old woman says, whatever be the case, I still have faith to the sanghas. See, that's the thing, you see. When you see the bigger picture, when you understand the meaning, you will not be carried away by small things happening here and there. So that kind of faith is called trusting faith. Just like a small child trusting her mother. That's the example. Look at small kids, their trust to the mother is so much that they think that my mother is everything. My mother is almost like, to that small child, the child may be thinking, my mother knows everything. She can do everything for me, Of course, she doesn't know everything. She cannot do everything, but still the child has that trust. So that kind of trust has to be there. And the third kind of faith is called aspiring faith. That means having seen all these qualities of body, speech and mind of the Buddha, you should develop this genuine wish that this is really great, how nice if I'm able to develop all these qualities within myself. You aspire to achieve those qualities. Just like a person who is thirsty and looking for water. If you're thirsty and looking for water, then always you're thinking about water. Oh, I'm so thirsty, from where I can get some water, from where I can get some, drink. You will be constantly thinking about that because you are tormented inside by that thirst. So you should have that kind of thirst towards the actualization of the qualities of the body, speech and mind of enlightened beings. And the fourth is called unchanging faith. That means once you have developed all these realizations, then whatever may come in your life, your faith will be static and unchanging. Because your faith is now cultivated in understanding and knowledge, not on hearsay, not on the fact because somebody says this or somebody says this. Whatever other people say, you will not be carried away by this. So that kind of faith is very important. Otherwise, today you listen to the Buddhist teaching, you say, oh, this is so good, I'll follow this. Tomorrow you listen to someone, yes, this is very good. So you have no idea where you are going, you see. I mean, in a very ordinary parlance, it's okay, you develop respect to each and every religion, but if you want to do a committed practice, then it's important that you should have knowledge based on understanding, faith based on understanding and knowledge, so that you will not be taken here and there easily by other people. So that kind of faith must be cultivated. Any question? One or two questions? We have 5 minutes. No questions? The causes of suffering are the few days ago.
Huh?
The causes of suffering
Oh.
are more than the causes of happiness are very few days ago. Now, just do it in the something happiness is worldwide. Putting on the happiness, do the although you want happiness, the causes of happiness are far and wide. Although you do not want suffering, the causes of sufferings are in plenty. Because the causes of suffering you have cultivated a lot from beginningless lifetime. So you have anger ready there, attachment ready there, ignorance ready there, all kind of negative emotions are there, they are in plenty. The causes of happiness, like compassion, you don't have much, wisdom, you don't have much. So that's the meaning. I'm not talking about external situations. External situations are more or less same. But we are talking primarily about the internal situations. If you look at the internal situations, then the fact is that it is easier to get habituated with the negative ways of things. It is more difficult to do the right thing. Therefore, not many people get habituated with the positive things. You see, when you do something negative, a little bit mischievous, there's some kind of temporary fun, so you go after that. So there's the thing. Yeah. No questions? Then stop here today. Thank you. We dedicate all the virtues that we earned for long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and other great teachers, and for the flourishment of Buddha's teaching and well-being of all sentient beings. Thank you.